Day 3, Indigenous Connectivity Summit. Welcome, everyone. I am your host, Phil Mojeko, once again, winging it. Good to be here. No, hold your applause, please. No need. You know what I'm doing up here. So we're kind of changing things a little bit, but not really. We're going to start with a panel this morning, which we've titled "When Good Isn't Good Enough." And I believe Mr. Alfred Loon, Jason Neepin, and Alfred's looking me at, he doesn't know. You're not on this panel, Alfred? I think. Mark? Yeah, I mean, you come on up if you want. I think you'd be a good voice on this one. Anyways, and Bill Murdoch and Mr. Jason Neepin will be moderated by Natalie. And so if we could have you up to the stage, please. And also, one more thing before we get started, I want to make everyone a little uncomfortable, but still comfortable. But what I want to ask is if we can please mix around our seating arrangements here, so we'll have a better opportunity to network with people we haven't had the chance to yet. So if not right now, by next break, please take a risk and sit at another table with someone else. I'm asking you that because we know there's people here who haven't had an opportunity to meet and speak with others. We have people from across North America and further. And so we want to be able to share and network and build friendships and relationships with those we haven't had the chance to yet. So please take a chance and get out there and move to a different table, please. Speak with someone you haven't, make a friend. Same goes for the people on Zoom. Okay, Natalie, take it away. Where's? Okay, just get started.
Welcome, everyone. Testing. Works.
This one's hot. Don't make it weird. Good. Appreciate it.
Oh, I was just saying we're starting now. Come on back.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about when good enough is not good enough. We have so much experience in the room, and I'm pleased to be sharing the stage with Alfred Loon and Matt Rantanen. And I think it makes sense to start with perhaps a couple of introductions. Could you tell us a bit about the region you serve and what kind of network you have? Turn it to you, Alfred.
Oh, me? I thought it was Matt.
Oh, I always go last.
All right. Hey, bonjour tout le monde. What I'm saying, so I'm asking my guys, we shall get this and yes, my name is Alfred Loon. I'm the founder, president, and chairman of EU Communication Network. I've been at this for 20 years, and the region we serve is in northern Quebec, and what we call EU is G, and in English it's James Bay, and en français c'est la Baie James. We serve about 14 communities, 9 are Cree communities, and 5 are the municipalities. I have a workforce about 25, and include me, or 26 of us. And we operate in the area that's like predominantly French, 3 languages, Cree, English, and French. And so that's about it in the nutshell.
Excellent. Thanks, Alfred. And we have 2 new panelists, so I'll turn it over to Bill Murdoch. Can you tell us a bit about the region you serve and what kind of network you have?
Clear Sky Connections. Our project is to connect all 63 First Nation communities in Manitoba with fiber for connectivity. So we build the physical fiber infrastructure, and then we partner with the communities to light it up, to provide the service. So Clear Sky is actually not an internet service provider. We just work with the community internet service providers, or the communities. It depends on the direction the community wants to go. If they want to run it themselves, or if they want to farm it out to a third party, like BCN, then we work on behalf of the communities.
Thanks, Bill. Matt, over to you.
Good morning. So the network that's in Southern California called the Tribal Digital Village Network started in 2001, and it started from a DC3 or OS3 connection, which is 45 megabits per second on copper. And we've graduated to 10 gigs of fiber at the head end and 10 gigs of fiber at the tail end. And everything in the middle is wireless. So it serves 17 tribal communities in the San Diego County and Riverside County, Southern California. And it is primarily, it is subsidized a little bit by the E-rate program, which is a federal subsidy program for library schools and Head Starts. And there's 28 towers, 20 of them are off grid on solar only, and 8 towers are grid tied. Every tower is backed up by a propane generator. And we are struggling in the dense populations to keep up with the definition of broadband, because the amount of available spectrum to us to use to do that deployment is not enough to be able to serve dense communities. So if you have a 300-400 homes, you don't have enough spectrum to be able to give that much throughput to each home. So that's kind of in line with the title.
Thanks, Matt. Over to you, Jason.
Good morning. Broadband Communications North, we are an ISP. We service over 50 communities in northern Manitoba. Pretty much halfway through, I guess, Dauphin River North, I guess Treaty 5, I guess you could say, is primarily who we focus on. We do work in partnership with Clear Sky Connections to have joint funding submissions. Currently, we get our internet from Lombard Avenue, Lombard and Portage, and we use the Manitoba Hydro Telecom transit to get up north. Thinking we have one urban Indigenous organization that we service, which is ourselves here in Winnipeg. I went to the board recently and I said, hey, can we look at the urban Indigenous market here in the cities? And it was crickets. So I'm looking for a new revenue streams. The board says just focus on the north. So that's our current market.
Thank you very much. So a lot of the audiences that come to the Indigenous Connectivity Summit are those who might be thinking of starting a network or are starting one and are looking for tips and advice on how to grow and further our goals. I'm curious to hear from you. Given your success, what was your "this isn't good enough" moment, and how did you go about tackling that with your networks? We'll start with Bill, and then we'll make our way down again.
Clear Sky Connections. So the project started with the Assembly Manitoba Chiefs under the Health Department. At that time, the scope of the project was how do we increase bandwidth to support electronic medical records for digital e-health or digital health or EMR, EHR. And there's a lot of advantages for digital health records. So that's where it started. Feasibility study was done. After the feasibility study was done, the only viable option was to run fiber everywhere. So the scope of the project expanded from providing more bandwidth to support electronic medical records to connecting communities with fiber. And then from there, we went to the process of technical design, legal design, financial design on how we're going to build it, how we're going to sustain it going into the future. And through that, there's been other benefits identified, such as education and entrepreneurial jobs within communities. So there's a lot of advantage to running fiber. That's where it started.
I figured these flies would disappear by now. It's winter in Winnipeg. Oh, it's all way inside. Yeah. For those of you, one who's thinking about starting your own networks, there's one thing that when the question is when is good not good enough.
When is good enough not good enough?
When is good enough? Okay. There's one word, and that is ownership. You gotta own your network first and foremost. That is very important. And that was my vision right from the get-go when I planned the network, is that the nation or the region has to own the network, not the telco. So that's very important. As a matter of fact, when we planned this, once we started planning, of course, the Bell subsidiary Telebec knew about what we were doing. They said, "Hey, Alfred, let's partner. That's for the hell of it. Okay, come on. What kind of partnership are we looking for?" And it says, "Okay, you guys do what you need to do, the decree, and our company will do what we need to do, and we'll work in parallel. Then we'll converge at the end." And I said, "Well, what are you gonna call this company, and who's gonna own it?" And they said, "We're gonna call it Telebec, and Bell will own it." And I said, "That's not good enough." He says, "I want to own a network," and that was it. And I just kind of, hey, this is not going to go anywhere. So I left the table. I left and said, "Listen, you're not listening to us." It says, "This network has to own by the region, by the nation, through the municipalities. But if you want to provide some services, you're more than welcome. But as far as ownership, it'll be ours." So that's a very most important thing that you have to take into consideration, is that you need to own the network, because once you own a network, you can pick and choose who you want to deal with. And we're a standalone network. We're not affiliated with Bell, TELUS, or Rogers. As a matter of fact, the only partnership I have with the telco is TELUS, and that was kind of why I had this partnership is through the telehealth. The province of Quebec, the ones that are in charge of the health system, and they wanted to telehealth. They put a call for tender, and they awarded the contract to TELUS. And of course, TELUS doesn't own the network in our region. They have no employees. We own it, and we're doing the work for TELUS. As a matter of fact, what's nice to see is that I don't pay TELUS. I send the bill to TELUS, and they pay me. So that's one of the advantages of owning the network, is that you send the bill, and you receive a check. You don't send it. You don't send the thing. Hope that's.
Thanks, Alfred. Over to you, Matt.
There's a bunch of things to think of here. Rewinding 21 years, if you're starting out now, I second that you have to own the infrastructure. Right now in the United States, there's a lot of money flowing around. But when is good enough not enough? It's only $3 billion. It's about a $10 or $11 billion problem. So that's not good enough. There needs to be more. But there are a lot of situations right now where an existing telephone company, similar to this situation, is offering services to a reservation because the tribe can build the backhaul, the middle mile, with their federal dollars that are allocated to them, and erasing the cost or the barrier to entry for the carrier to get to those reservations. So all they really are responsible for is serving the end community. So they're not really investing a bunch of capital expenditure that they have to return. The problem with that is they also want to own the endpoint infrastructure, the to the home infrastructure. And we're advising and supporting tribes in the thought process of maintaining that infrastructure, because the tribe built the middle mile. They should own the middle mile. The tribe is building, having the last mile build out. Even if a carrier builds out the last mile, there should be a transition process over 3 to 5 years when they've returned their investment from the subscription base, that the tribe owns that infrastructure. Because then if that carrier dies off, or if that carrier gets greedy then the tribe can disconnect from that carrier and entice another carrier to use the existing infrastructure that they own to come in and do that. When is good enough not good enough is as the evolution of technology changes, as the broadband requirements change, the bandwidth usage requirements change. Your network sometimes is not good enough. A lot of times when we get federal subsidy or grant allocations to build network, we build to today's standard, not to tomorrow's standard, right? We're not projecting the future. We're not understanding that we will be growing by next year or in 5 years from now. And how do we build that? How do we change the language in grants and subsidies to be able to build for next year, to build for 5 years from now, and justify that in the spending? We want to future-proof our networks for at least a period of time so that we're not constantly having to upgrade tomorrow. So that's another position where good enough is not good enough. And is good enough ever good enough? I mean, good enough doesn't last very long, right? It's a short moment in time. So I think we need to plan longevity.
You're good.
I'm good enough.
From a Manitoba perspective, right now, we're capped out everywhere. We have waiting lists. So right now is not good enough. The current situation. In partnership with Clear Sky, we have 2 communities, Pine Creek and Lake Manitoba. We were supposed to get them connected to Manitoba Hydro Telecom this fall. Due to privatization, ExploreNet, it's pushed back 12 months. Also, Little Black River, there's cost overruns. We can't tie in where it's economically feasible. We're told we have to go 40 kilometers, which makes the project unfeasible. So there's current barriers provincially, federally, to the point of building for tomorrow. Our applications into the federal government are for the UBF for $225 million. However, we just resubmitted with ZAO. So 2 lines of 100 gigabits to northern Manitoba increases our applications to $330 million. So that's an extra $100 million, but we're building for tomorrow. We're requesting it. So that's, we would like to own our own network, and we're looking for partners to have that vision. But up until now, we have not advertised. We have not tooted our own horn. So we're just initiating those processes now. So right now, it's not good enough here in Manitoba.
Sorry, yeah, just to follow up with that. There's one community that has they've had fiber literally across the road from their main point of presence in the community. It's been there for years, but it's owned by a major telco, and they provide cell service over that fiber connection. So the community is not allowed to connect into that until the agreements are in place. Also, the community is planning on moving their point of presence. They're planning on building a new building beside the existing building. So they've contracted with a major telco to run fiber from the existing fiber into their existing point of presence. Let's say it's 100 meters. The new building, say they needed 130 meters of fiber. Well, the major telco is refusing to put in an extra 50 meters of fiber to accommodate when the new building is moved. So they can just pull the fiber out, run it to the new building. They'll want to do a whole new build and then charge them again.
Yep.
Thanks for that, Bill. One of the things you said, Matt, really struck me. Is good enough ever good enough? When we think about the rate at which internet technologies are constantly evolving, we have a digital divide now, but even when connectivity does happen, there are other levels of digital divide. So my question to everyone next is, thinking about this, how do we get that message across of, even, is good enough ever good enough? And do you have any advice on how to go about, making for smaller network opportunities? How would you go about getting that message across in a way that makes things like fiber a possibility?
I'll dive on that one first on that grenade. And so I think what the conversation needs to be in the community is about how tribes adopt, how tribal communities adopt the next thing. Like, so if you are going to be in charge of your own water, we become experts in water, right? If you're going to be in charge of your own electricity, you become experts in electricity. We are now being in charge of our own broadband. So we're going to be experts in broadband, not at just how to build it, but how to use it, right? So you see users that don't have access to broadband in a normal community and they get access to broadband. They're active users functionally, but there have been studies done by Native Public Media, there have been studies done by Arizona State University that show that when tribes get access to the technology, they're maximum users, they're super users. They adopt the environment, they learn how to use it, they learn how to navigate it and integrate it into their lifestyle. We need to have those conversations with people that aren't on the internet yet together and as a community to understand what the future looks like, to project what that future looks like, rather than, and I hate this statement, it is what it is. You know, that one burns me. It's the same as good enough is not, yeah. It isn't, you know, you can dictate what it is. You can change that path. You can, you know, project for the future. You can plan for the future. I mean, everybody's looking 7 generations out, right? If you adopt that model of thinking and you're responsible for 7 generations out, plan broadband for 7 generations out.
Alfred,
Yeah,
go ahead.
sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
a man, I don't listen that well.
Yes, so the question's about how do you get that message across that is good enough ever really good enough when we think about the speed of, you know, rapidly evolving internet technologies?
So, okay, well, I would figure that you know that the size of network and what we do is good enough, but it isn't. It's never going to be good enough, you know. And like for example, you know, our fiber to the home. Okay, our fiber to the home. We entered into a partnership with a third party. We have 10,000 home passes. We gave 10,000. We handed 10,000 home passes to this company on a silver platter. All I had to do was little marketing. They only have little over 5,000 clients. That's not good enough. You know, considering that they didn't have to install, do anything. We just hand them over 10,000 clients, for crying out loud. That wasn't good enough. That's why we decided to discontinue the exclusively contract on the fiber at home, and we did an open access because we want other competitors to come in, so the people in the region can have a choice. Because we built this fantastic network, and as far as residents, we only have one choice, one ISP. So that's one reason why it wasn't good enough to me for the clients. That's why we opened it up to open access, have other providers to come in, and they can compete for the clients. When we started the network, the total network was only 5 gig. That wasn't good enough. Now it's over 100 gig. That's how we expand. So like, and you know, and yes, and like the moment you build the network, you just have to go, you know, keep on building. It's not like saying once you build it, the customers will come. Exactly what happened to us EU network. For example, at when we bought the dark fiber from Hydro Quebec, they told us, okay, we'll sell you the fiber under these conditions. We don't want to have nothing to do with you. We don't want to manage your network. We're not going to help you. We're just going to sell you in. Go away. We started building a network. You know what happened? Hydro Quebec, ECN. You guys have excess fiber, and we're going to go to these communities. I said, yes, we do. We want to buy some fiber from you. Okay. So, and I said to my project manager, what the hell happened to the? We don't have nothing to do with you. Blah blah blah. Like, go away. And that was from there on. We became the biggest partner of Hydro Quebec in Quebec in telecommunications.
I love it. Thank you. Who wants to go next, Bill?
One of the fiber builds we did to the community, we replaced their wireless backhaul with a fiber backhaul. Once the fiber was in, the community had 10 times more, roughly 10 times more bandwidth than they had previously. Now, within a year, they're wanting to upgrade again. They want more and more bandwidth for these other services. The example I used before, if you think about a grain of rice as being a bit, so there was a project in, I believe it was Ontario, where they were looking at a fax network, sending faxes to all the health centers. That's where that project started, and then it increased to, to providing connectivity for telehealth and electronic medical records to the various communities. So that's where it started. It started with very low data needs to, then it ended up with being very high data needs. So when's good enough, not good enough? Everybody keeps talking about internet. Internet's a service. So if everybody has internet service, then what's the next step? Well, our next thing is going to be cell service. So these are just services. So to reframe the question to, instead of how do we get better internet in the communities, well, how do we get better connectivity in the communities to support all these services like cell service, obviously internet, other data services. So to reframe it from internet to connectivity.
Thanks for that. Go ahead.
Just to add about our capacity here in Manitoba, we're using Starlinks for stopgap measures for nursing stations. We're doing installs. Ideally, we don't want to do that. We would like to own our own network. We would like to have better services. We have applications in for low Earth orbit for some of these communities. But one of the biggest issues is getting our messaging out. Right now, when I first started a year ago, I had a meeting with one of the regional officers here in Manitoba region, ISOC, and it was very condescending. I was kind of triggered, like, why do you guys need internet? Are you guys just going to sit around and watch movies? I'm like, how insulting is that, right? But right, but there's also all these services like mental health. Like the biggest issue that I see for our people, like instead of going to the city to go see a therapist, we could stream it online. Like little things like that, like that'll improve your life. It'll save so much, millions of dollars collectively, and it's the barrier. So right now, what we're doing is we're starting a marketing campaign. We got a new logo. We have an interview with Winnipeg Free Press. We got to change the minds of the people here. We need their support. We need the support of Manitobans, Canadians, and they need to know our story. People are not aware of the challenges that we face, but like I said, we're tapped out. We need way more bandwidth, and we need a better network. And we're Indigenous owned. One of the challenges that we faced was the policymakers don't believe that Indigenous people can run their own ISP, even though we're doing it 20 years in. So there's all these misconceptions right now that are barriers, and I think we can overcome them, but those are our biggest challenges right now.
Excellent. Thank you.
Can I tag on that? So, I mean, not to take away from the impact of that, but we get argument all the time of, well, you're basically just going to be serving up Netflix, you know, and my answer is, so what? And they look at me like, what do you mean, so what? I said, well, we live hours from the movie theater. Some of these families have a car that you'll tie up the car going to the movie theater. It costs $100 to take 4 people to the movies anymore. You snacks, tickets, and time out of the day. Wouldn't it be great to have that entertainment in the house just like you do? And they just shut up right away. But then you go layer on all of the services like telehealth, telemental health, all the different things, education and things. But I throw it right in their face. So they look at you like, what the hell?
That's excellent. So something that strikes me as well is the potential role of partnership in helping to accomplish some of these goals. Can you tell me a bit about what partnership means to you and how that could potentially play a factor in helping to move the needle in the right direction?
I'll jump on that. Okay. Our initial partner was Clear Sky Connections. Unfortunately, they ran out of runway. Still, ideally, we'd like to work with Indigenous partnerships. But through this process, looking for new partners, we partnered with ZAO. ZAO services the major telcos. So in my mind, if and when we do proceed with our new partnership, in my mind, BCN will be a major telco. You know, it's perception. And so we want to deal with the best, but personally, ideally, we want to support Indigenous companies as well.
Can you say the question again?
Sorry?
Repeat the question.
Okay, the question is, what does partnership mean to you, and how can that potentially play a factor in helping to move the needle?
All right. So I'm just going to tell you right now, you can't do this without partnership. So the 21 years of Tribal Digital Village Network, we've had 100 partners in the process. I used to put them up as my last slide when I would speak on slides. I don't speak with slides very much anymore, but I couldn't fit them all on the slide. You know, it became so small you couldn't read it. And you think, what kind of partner? Well, you know, there's a provider, upstream provider, but you know, there's service technician, there's software management, there's education partners at university, community colleges, you know, the lower or earlier education processes, early childhood development, you know, community utilities companies that support you in the power and different things like that, tribal. I think we need to look at this, that yes, we want to be self-contained and self-sustainable and know all of this stuff, but you have to realize that if you don't have the human capacity in your space to do this, that you're going to have to partner with other people that are around you, or other services or other companies that are around you. And how do you become a better entity to manage partners, right? Learn how to be a good partner yourself, and learn how to be a good manager of outside sources. Yes, we want to support tribal. We want to keep the dollar on the reservation or the reserve. Yes, we want to continue to uplift the community. But when the community doesn't have the capacity, align that community, your community, with the most strategic and reciprocal partners, right? It's give and take relationship. It's a symbiotic relationship, not a parasitic relationship. What we see from a lot of carriers is a parasitic relationship, and we want to be an equal partner in this process. So as you look out over the landscape to better your opportunities, look for those types of situations and know that you're not going to do this alone.
I think partnerships. Yes, I figure partnership is the best way. If you don't know anything about the industry or the business you want to get into, yeah, look for a partner. That's the quickest way to learn about it. And it doesn't mean that you have to have the partner for 25 years. You know, you know? Yeah, it's but I'll leave Eric a bit alone because this is not telecom, but you know, the first, of course, the first partnership that the first partnership that we had to develop, of course, is with municipalities. So like, you know, and it was I think it was, I believe it was the first project that our communities and the municipalities have entered into partnership in the project, and that's telecommunications, because everybody you know, everybody requires telecom regardless who you are, right? Cree, Caucasian, Francophone. So like, you know, and you know, so that's, you know, that was the first thing that we had to develop. And of course we had to you know, of course we had to do this what we call community buy-in. That is some of our partnership with our communities. So and also the you know, like I said, I didn't really had to look for a partner. Others that were looking for a partner, and they approached me. And the two nations that we have a partnership with is the north of us, the Inuit, and you know, is through the KRG, the Cadre Regional Government, and because their network begins at one of our communities, Sasapi, and that's the fiber that goes underwater, and it'll eventually land end in the Angava Bay in the Kujua. So, and the second partnership that that we had to enter is with on the southern side of us is the Atikamekw. And that one it's a little interesting because the Hydro-Quebec wanted to extend their electrical line from where we are in Ladore, and to the electrical line to Montreal. And they had to go through the Atikamekw territory. And in that agreement with Atikamekw, the Hydro-Quebec said that the Atikamekw Nation will have access to this fiber. And at the same time, Hydro-Quebec said, "Hey, we're going to build this line, this fiber. Are you interested?" I said, "Sure, under one condition: you have to partner with Atikamekw." Oh, yeah, sure, why not? So we created this company called STAC. It stands for the Society Telukikaso Atikamekw. It's a French acronym. So that's another form of partnership that we have with them, and and like I said, we don't have to look for our partners. It's people that look to us for partnership.
Thank you, Alfred. Bill, your thoughts on partnership?
Well, the three parts of the project would be the political, the money, and the technical. So all three areas require expertise, and some of that expertise is very specialized in certain areas. So it's impossible for any single person or entity to do everything on their own. They have to engage with partners to help tackle the problem, to help build the business case. Forums like this to help push policy, education. Talking with others, having the official meetings on the record, and then to establish the relationships, to have the conversations. Trust is what happens after the meeting. So building that trust, building that human network, to learn from best practices, what works, what doesn't work, which contractors should you work with, which ones should you avoid. Trying to think forward as to avoid mistakes, to learn from other people's mistakes. Working in IT for the last 20 years, sometimes on purpose, I know this is not going to work. Let's see how bad it's going to blow up, and let's examine the wreckage.
Push the button. Do not push the candy red button. I just want a couple of caveats here. Beware of exclusivity in partnerships. Beware of really long terms in partnerships. You want to remain flexible. You want to remain able to pivot and take on newer technologies, take on newer opportunities in a timely fashion. Don't get caught in things that are extremely long term that aren't already future proofed. Like an IRU for fiber, future proofed. But is it at a good rate? So make sure you're establishing a rate for the next 20 years that you can manage. But don't get stuck in these partnerships that are extremely long when technology changes every 3 years, right? We see technology change every 3 years. Don't get tied up in something 5 to 10 years that won't evolve with you, or your contract or your agreement or your partnership won't evolve with the changes in the technology, right? Fiber's future proof, but make sure your fiber agreement says that the optronics, the electronics that run the fiber, can evolve with the speed changes and the things over time. Don't lock yourself into some sort of a channel that you can't, turn left or right out of for too long of a time. Otherwise, you become irrelevant. Chris, what? Non-disclosure agreements. Okay, here's another one that is a pet peeve. Be careful working with small companies that will lock you into a non-disclosure agreement that stops you from being able to talk about that relationship, right? Other people need to know whether that is a reputable company to work with or not. And if you're having trouble, you don't want to be legally, pursued if you need to talk about it. So make sure that when you are in a non-disclosure agreement, it is mutual. It allows you to have the level of freedom to get away from that relationship and to be able to communicate about that relationship. They are advantageous in some places so that your plans, if they are in a competitive space, aren't learned by others so that you have a foothold on the space. But rarely in a tribal community is that an advantage. It's more of an advantage for a carrier or a consultant to tie you up and tie up your and close your mouth so you can't talk about a situation while they take advantage of your situation.
One comment on NDAs. Our NDA says, you don't talk about us. If you do, we're going to sue you. So like that's our NDA.
So that's where it would be mutual, because they expect the same.
Exactly.
Excellent. You look like you have some
Especially-
extra advice, Bill. Go ahead.
The establishing the relationships, building relationships, working with the people, the individuals. Very important to be able to have a frank conversation off the record with individuals, and not take it personally. Like some of the people I work with, well, you're an idiot because of this. Well, they wouldn't say that publicly, and I would never say that publicly with people on the stage. But in private, I basically, you're an idiot because of this. So you have to have.
Bill, we need to have more public conversations because I don't like when you call me an idiot.
So to have those personal relationships, so you can have those hard conversations when you need to have those hard conversations, rather than people feel like they need to walk on eggshells and be very careful of what they say as to not to offend, to be politically correct all the time. But it's a lot quicker just to be straightforward, honest, and just have those conversations. But to get there, you have to build the relationship.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about, the internet is really just a series of human connections. It's really inspiring. And to Matt's point, we don't have to do it alone. So I think this advice that you've shared is really, really insightful and really helpful. Thank you. I do want to ask, do we have time for questions and answers? All right, sounds good. Any questions for our panelists? Just raise your hand and we'll run a mic over. Sally.
Put your running shoes on.
One of the things I've noticed over the last few years is the federal government will pass legislation and not have the technology in place to back it up. I'm speaking, this is for the Canadian members of the panel. The states may have similar legislation, I don't know. We have a piece of legislation called Jordan's Principle, and that is where the idea is we don't all start off at the same place in life. And Jordan's Principle, it was brought in to, provide a level playing field for Indigenous children on and off reserve, if they needed help or guidance in the area of autism or mental health, or they had learning disabilities. I'd like to ask Jason and Bill and Alfred, how equipped is your network now to deliver those services to children? Because I think in the case of Northern Manitoba, that this is not the case.
I'll go first.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, correct. Northern Manitoba. Just basic internet. School learning from the home during the pandemic. I've had chiefs very, very angry at BCN. We can't provide any connectivity. We have C-band satellite. It's old technology. And when we have requested for upgrades, so far, thankfully, we just got extended 3 more years of C-band satellite. So I don't really see anything changing soon. But no, it's terrible. We'll use those words. We can't support Jordan's Principle at all.
Clear Sky is not an internet service provider. We partner with internet service providers. But my thought around the Jordan's Principle is to understand the process. So you put in an application for JP funding. And then 9 times out of 10, that's rejected. And then you appeal it. When you appeal it, it actually goes into a separate process where it's independently reviewed from the government reviewers. So if you put it in a JP application, it's rejected, well, appeal it, and it just goes through the separate process. Then it has a better chance of approval because of that, how it works. Letters of support from the communities, the family, the healthcare professional, the allied health professionals, chief and council, to document the need for the connectivity in the communities. That goes a long way with funding applications. But the opposite to that would be if there's 5 funding applications and everybody's writing letters of support for all 5 applications, when the funding provider looks at it, okay, well, what does the community want to do? Well, the community wants whichever one gets funded. Well, there needs to be a little bit more thought involved because all 5 applications may be different. So the question comes back, well, what does the community want to do? They support all of them. And then now you're putting the funding provider on the spot to pick what's best for the community when it should be the community deciding what's best for the community.
That's a great question. Thank you. That was a great question. Any more questions?
You have a great network.
I don't know how I'm gonna ask this question, but I just wanted to share like a situation. And I don't want to throw a nation under the bus. So we have a nation that has their own internet service for their members, and there's a lot of complaints that they don't have the connectivity. It's really poor. So, and I understand the whole like concept of, you know, having that money on the nation and, you know, supporting our businesses, and so we have that poor service, and the nation members don't want to, you know, they want to move away from, you know, bringing that money on keeping that money on the reserve. They want to move out because they're getting the poor service. And then we have the service provider like having like getting they're not getting paid. So there's like that conflict. So like how, like, you know, for me, like I'm part of, you know, community engagement, and I don't want to, you know, like just jump in there and, you know, get involved, because I don't want them to think that I'm just there to, you know, take the money. And so I'm just like, you know, you guys talking about this, like, it just kind of makes me wonder, like, how would you deal with like a situation like that?
Yeah, so actually dealing with that situation at the moment, it's an evolution problem. So, and it really fits the title. A lot of smaller tribes and a lot of you know, tribes that are trying to fulfill the service because there is no service, builds it out, you know, puts a lot of effort into it and get everybody connected, right? And then let it sit. A network is a living thing. A network is an evolving thing. Technology is ever changing. So sustainability and you know, planning includes growth and change, right? So initially, you know, I'm assuming that the community said, oh, we need broadband or we need internet access. So they built internet access, check the box, move on. The problem with internet access is as we understand the internet, we evolve and we learn how to use more internet. As companies get lazier because bandwidth speeds get faster, they don't clean up their code, and the quantity of bandwidth needed to use the internet goes up. We also become heavier consumers of internet, and now there's streaming content like video, which is quite cumbersome for a network. So there's this constant evolution of us as people, and as communities need to grow, that service needs to grow with it. And that's the conversation that needs to happen. That's the understanding that needs to happen. And did I hear you say the community provides that service for free, or is it for pay? For pay? And it is the only game in town, right? There's no other options. Yeah, so in that situation, like in Southern California, we have tribes right now that are applying for individual dollars for their specific tribe to step away from the network that we've been building for 21 years, because the Tribal Chairmen's Association hasn't green-lighted the Tribal Digital Village Network to evolve, to take on fiber, to start building out away from wireless, or to build fiber closer to the endpoint so the wireless is more effective. Because it was we need to get internet to the people and check the box. We did that. So those are conversations that have to happen at the leadership level. It's a education process that has to happen at the leadership level. That this wasn't a one-time, bring in this device and now we're solved. It is an evolution with the growth of our community. This service needs to grow with our community, and that is the suggestion I would make, to to have those types of conversation, to show metrics, to show the use of. I think it was 10 years ago, I was sitting in a meeting with the California Department of Education folks in San Diego area, and we were talking about a standard for speeds in San Diego for broadband. And people were like, oh, 3 down, 2 up on megabits. And I'm like, that's really low. And everybody's like, yeah, but it's a lot, because like this is DSL in this area is not going to work, or this service is not going to work. And then satellite's like, well, we can't serve that. And they were fighting to stay in the game. So I said, education, what's the lowest common denominator? How much bandwidth do you need to actually have kids be able to do homework? And the tech guy spoke up and he goes, we need 6 down, 1.5 up to be able to do video streaming. This was 10 years ago, do video streaming and stuff like that. And then, and so that evolved to the Department of Technology, and California adopted that speed. California didn't change that speed until this year. We are way past that. So carriers that could provide on their DSL systems, their legacy DSL systems on copper, at 6 down, and they actually fought it and got it down to 1, not 1.5 up. They were able to continue to block other people that were providing 100 megabit symmetrical fiber to the home from getting state funding, because they could serve 6 megs down and 1 meg up in their service territory, and they could block you from getting that state funding. California got stuck in the mud too, right? So, it is a conversation that has to constantly evolve with the changes and the needs of the community. Hope that helped.
Yeah, to add to the data piece, it's moving to, well, let's encrypt everything. So with everything being encrypted, the data needs increase, because you have that extra overhead. As for the connectivity in the community, there's 3 main business pieces that's to provide connectivity to a person in a community. So starting at the global internet, the connection, you have the gateway. So the gateway, using Manitoba for example, so the gateway's in Winnipeg. Then from Winnipeg to the global internet where everybody can connect to. Then you have a transit or transport. So if it's a community in the north, that would be the connection from Winnipeg to the community, to the main point of presence or main distribution point. And then in the community, from the main distribution point, that would be the ISP. So then from the POP to the individual home. So somewhere along that path, there's a bottleneck. If I had to guess, it would probably be with the transport or the transit piece, the connection from Winnipeg to the community, because the wireless technology will say supports 100 meg connection. So from the tower in the community to the home, you may have a 100 meg connection, but from that tower back to Winnipeg, you may only have 100 meg connection, and that 100 meg connection is shared between the whole community. So that would be my guess as to where the bottleneck is.
Thank you. I think there was another question over here. This side of the room? Still a question? Yeah.
I'm Heat Luke. Good morning, everyone. This is an interesting conversation, and funding and piecemeal funding approaches with the types of targets that are put in place. So I'd be really curious with that community, for instance, too, that is offering services and their inability to provide the speeds that they need. How much of that is actually dependent on piecemeal funding envelopes that you have to apply for on a individual project basis without sustainable long-term funding? So in a lot of ways, this is kind of, it's the opposite of a positive feedback. Exercising sovereignty and, you know, providing these services so that we can have effective governance. If you don't have the funding availability for it, and you've got this limited window to apply for funding, you've got ISPs knocking on your door to put the infrastructure in place without any sort of commitment to maintain infrastructure and upgrade along the ways. And then community members don't see what's going on in the background, and it feels like our leadership might not be able to meet our needs. It kind of perpetuates the same challenges that we have, that undermines our rights and our effectiveness and our ability to effectively govern. So just be curious about, you know, for instance, I know I'm talking from the Canadian context specifically right now, but, you know, there's a commitment to connect everybody by 2030 to 5010. And I'm just curious with panelists what their opinion is on the likelihood of that kind of being reached, and about the possibility, you know, exploring the idea of substantive equality. So Jordan's principle is substantive equality, which is equity. And instead of having targets determined by a federal government that's providing funding with a hard target goal like 5010, instead of taking and adopting a substantive equality expectation of having the same level of service speed that you have in urban and more densely populated areas as you would have on reserve. So sorry, that was like 6 questions.
I'll answer one of them just from
Sure.
a generic perspective. We need to build in sustainability, right? Not piecemeal funding from grants, not, you know, handouts and different things like that. We need to figure out how to sustain projects. And you know, I'm not going to answer all 6 of your questions, but initially, you know, 20 years ago, every tribe I worked with in Southern California was, you know, oh, we got to apply for the next grant, and that grant lasts a year. So what are we going to do in a year? And they just recycle the staff that ran that grant and they put them on the next grant. Got to get out of that mindset. If you're still in that mindset, you're 10, 20 years old in your thought process. You need to figure out sustainability. Every project you develop has to have a sustainability component before you lay the first brick, before you build the first tower, you know, you cut the first road. You have to figure out how that's going to sustain in long term and evolve. It's all about evolution, and how are you going to fund that? How is that going to fund itself moving forward?
Just quickly from Manitoba, the ISK region funds $5 million a year for connectivity. Our demand is in excess of $400 million. Minister Miller from ISK is lobbying Minister Champagne from ISED. That's the support we're getting from Indian Affairs. So that's just in the context of Manitoba. We will take the $5 million per year and build what we can. But moving forward, we're never going to catch up, and there's no Jordan's principle possibility for a while in the current model.
Can I?
Alfred and then Bill.
I think I didn't answer the other 2 questions either, so I'll see what I can do. So I almost got away with it. Anyway, Ria, you're yeah. I'm just gonna. I don't think we'll be able to answer all your 6 questions because I didn't hear any of them. But there's one thing you mentioned about the targets of 5010. That was established during the BSO hearings. This basic service objectives in 2014, which we participated. And when we heard that this is going to be the target by 2030. Okay, we mentioned our submissions, and we told the CRTC that 5010, that's not good enough for me. I'm going to offer what I want to offer. That means residents 1 gigabyte, and the health. Well, each building I'll have 100 meg and burstable, meaning that if you go 100 megs, past 100 megs, we're just gonna look the area around because you're already. And that's what we did. As far as the funding is concerned, we never applied for a piecemeal. It's always the global project where it included Cree communities and municipalities. I think one of the reasons why we got all the funding that we required because the collaboration between the Cree communities and the municipalities. If we just said, well, we only want to connect our communities and and municipalities can do on their own, I don't think it would be that. I don't think we would be that successful. But the fact that we collaborated, there was a collaboration between the municipalities and the Cree communities, that really helped a lot. As far as ladies from Rogers, when we planned this network, as far as the residents was concerned, we knew that not everybody is going to be able to pay. And even though that as Jason can attest to that yes, we are. I don't want to brag either. We are one of the, I guess I can say, successful nations in this country. Well, this in Quebec. And so what we did was, when we planned this, we connected the entities first: the health, the education, the councils. That we knew that they were going to, they will have the ability to pay, especially because the health and education that paid by the Quebec government. So so we knew that. And once we connected all the entities, then we looked at the residents. And yes, we do connect the residents. We also disconnect almost same amount as we connect. So however, the third party that's running the fiber to home has never came to us and is telling us that, hey, we have a problem with the clients. They never mentioned that. Yes, they say yes. There's few disconnects, but even the customers that were disconnected, in a month or two, they reconnected. So because they knew that hey, this is the speeds that we're offering, and the price that we're offering, we're very good, And yes, if a home has to choose, I'm going to buy food or pay my internet. Guess what wins? Food. And even during the pandemic, and everybody we thought that was going to be get laid off. Although we never publicly said it, that we will not disconnect anybody during the pandemic, because that's the only connection that they have to the outside world. Okay, and lo and behold, thank God that nobody got laid off, because the northern regions where the COVID wasn't that extreme, so they were still functioning. Although they had little changes in terms of scheduling. So some people have to work worked at home, and certain issues. So and I think that's what helped a lot, is that hey, we provide services, and we'll try to keep up we'll try to the best as we can to ensure that nobody will get disconnected during the pandemic, because like I said, that's the only access to have the outside world.
Thanks, Bill.
The federal funding targets of if you have economies of scale, so if having that collective voice and having the political will of the group of communities to work as a single entity, huge benefit. That way you don't have individual communities fighting over the same funding pot and confusing the funding providers. Rather than having to build 4 different instances of the same infrastructure to service 4 communities that happen to be next door to each other. If they're all willing to work together, then you can build one main trunk into the community and then splice off to connect the other 4. So the economies of scale, huge. In Manitoba, we have 22 fly-in communities. Medical transportation is very expensive because those communities do not have hospitals. So if anybody in the community gets injured, they're required to go to the hospital. They put them on an airplane, fly them to the hospital. Every time that plane takes off, it's on average is $20,000. Back when I was working on the health side with the electronic medical records, at that time, the average for Manitoba was about $110 million a year for MedTrans. If we had high-speed connectivity to all the communities, if we were able to save 10% of that cost, $11 million a year, if we had $11 million a year sustainable, that we could leverage that to borrow funds, and that would pay for the whole network. It'd be done. Anchor institutions, yes, connect the anchor institutions within the community. For some communities, that covers 100% of the cost. Then you could charge some nominal fee to everybody else to cover hardware that's in the home. Funding windows and applying for funding. Sometimes those windows are very short and the requirements are very huge. I know last year there was a call for funding proposals. On the list, they wanted the permits for the build, and you had 1 month to apply. Well, it takes us 6 weeks to get a permit, so there's no way to meet the requirements. Actually, the current builds we have right now, there's 2 permits that we need. We have 1 permit. I've been waiting over 6 months for the other permits to be issued.
Thanks, Bill. Do we have time for one more question? And then we'll have to
One
wrap it
more
up.
question right here.
when Zoom and question and quenched. Thank you. I want to just acknowledge the unceded yet occupied territory we're doing this work on. I just have a question. I was noticing when Matt was talking about the NDAs. I think that I was hoping that you could elaborate more. That could have been a complete discussion on that, because if we're closing off that information, we're also closing off the information that we may need to share if there's some negative stuff happening behind that, right? Because say the Lytton fire is in my territory in BC. You can imagine contractors that we knew should not have been in there. We didn't have an NDA, so we were able to share the negative so that they were able to understand that this is going on, right? So I just wanted to make sure that when we're talking NDAs, that it's equal both ways. If we can't talk about them, they can't talk about us, and that's an issue, because if we're there, they can put us in silos, and they can actually they can use that to divide and conquer as well. So just be mindful of that, because if I want to help a First Nation community out beside me and I find success with a company, that's good. But if I find negative with the company, I can't share that, right? And that's one of the things that I think we need to be. I was hoping that you might just elaborate a little bit more on that, Cook.
Thanks. Any reactions from the panel?
So, everything you said is exactly what I was trying to get at. We have some examples in the States where consulting companies will come in and before they'll talk to you, they'll market to you that they have solutions for your community, which we should be wary of anyway, as we all know. But hey, I know how to fix your problem. There's the door. So they'll come in and they will market themselves very well that they're going to have a solution for you, and then they'll say, hey, let's sign this NDA. And if you have legal representation, hopefully that becomes a mutual NDA if you really feel that that's necessary. Or can you proceed without? And to kind of sidestep the NDA piece to find out whether people are good or not, like, because your mouth is tied up. You can't talk about them. You can't talk about their reputation or how they work with you when you do this. If they're a reputable company, at that point, ask for references and people that they will promote that will talk about them well, and then ask those. Do your homework and do serious a line of questioning there. But if you're signing an NDA, you don't need to do a broad spectrum NDA that covers every aspect of an agreement. If you're signing an NDA with, and I'll just throw it out because of Rogers is here, but if Rogers doesn't want people to know that they have fiber or services in an area because there's competition from their from the other carriers, but they need to use that secret piece of information to serve your community, then make the NDA about that. Don't make the NDA about your relationship. Don't make the NDA about your project. Make it about the piece of information that they deem secret, so that you're not locking yourself up from doing everything else. It's common sense, you would think, but in the heat of the moment, we kind of chuck that out the door occasionally and forget to do all of our homework. We're in a fast-paced environment. We're looking at money. We're looking at opportunity. A lot of times you gloss over some of the stuff that's the most important that'll tie your hands for the future. So, happy to do more offline on that too, but we've just seen a lot of experiences in the US where, as soon as the money hit the water, the sharks came out and all the sharks had NDAs. We're like, wait, why are there so many NDAs now?
Yeah, for us, we have we have 3 versions of 3 different NDAs. There's one of the organizations we work with. We have an NDA with them. I can't even say which organization it is because they don't want other people to go to them to get what we're getting, because so it's to protect them. One of the other organizations is just to protect their costs. So they don't want us to all divulge how much they're charging us. So to protect information, thinking about specific examples. And other times you have to share information to be able to move the conversation forward. Sometimes you have to share proprietary information with other individuals. So you obviously want to protect that. And the huge piece is thinking groups. So like-minded individuals, we all share information, and it's all part of CYA. So you have the document trail. So you're sharing information that gets out. Well, you have an NDA in place that's supposed to protect it.
Thanks. Any other last quick reactions?
I only sign NDAs with white companies. No, anyway, with NDAs, they're not that rigid. I can talk about who I'm in business with, but not in greater detail. I just say, well, I have an NDA, so I can only say, yes, we work with this entity, but we do have an NDA, and that's where it stops. So,
there's an interesting thing is the U.S. federal government will not sign an NDA. The departments of the U.S. federal government won't sign an NDA because they don't want to be restricted from anything or be liable, but state governments will. So be wary of that.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. This has been really, really incredible. Really appreciate you sharing your vast experience. I think it's been useful and very inspiring to all of our participants. And Jason, Matt, Alfred, Bill, just a heartfelt thanks. This has been excellent.
Cheers.
Christopher Mitchell, the man, the myth, the legend, coming up to stage right now to give a quick presentation on rural technology expectations. Please sit tight. We're going to burn through this. We're over time. Not burn, but go through this.
Thank you. At these events, there's often a spoken phrase that I feel like has been somewhat unspoken, and I wanted to ask Mark and Phil if I could come up for a minute to share a couple of thoughts and perhaps provoke a little conversation. That is correct. there is a sense that I often get from people about what is possible, and people are limiting themselves in terms of what technology may be appropriate. And with that, I wanted to share some research that we had done in the United States about where cooperatively owned, so this is just cooperative business models and municipal business models. I don't think we have any, there is perhaps a little bit of tribally owned broadband networks, but not all of them are on here. So this excludes privately owned fiber networks in the United States delivering service to homes. The reason that we pop it up usually is to show what's going on in North Dakota and South Dakota. North Dakota has the same population density as basically everything in Manitoba south of here. It's about between 1 to 15, 20 people per square mile. This works out to a few people per square mile. And I was just digging around, and it's not that far off. And I've literally heard after this fiber was built, because a lot of this fiber is 10 years old in North Dakota, built by about 15 to 17 different local cooperatives and private companies that are rooted in the communities with federal funding. And I've heard people say, well, never going to get fiber across the prairie. And I'm like, not again. We've done it. Because they didn't realize it. And there's a sense of like, well, it's not economical. It's not technologically possible. Like there's this conception that's really being limited as to what is possible. And I'm not up here to say we shouldn't use wireless for different situations, but I'm always disheartened when I hear a sense that we can only use wireless because it is not practical to use other technologies. These are decisions that are often made at the governmental level. And I just wanted to share in our research, we've found that generally it is more expensive to build telephone lines. It is more expensive to build the electric system lines. It is way more expensive to build roads, bike paths, anything underground, water systems, sewer systems per mile. We talk about fiber optic cable like it's super expensive. But when you look at these life transforming and opportunity creating networks, it's the lowest cost infrastructure we can build in many cases. So I just wanted to throw that out there so that people would be thinking about that in that mindset. It is expensive, but not in the way that we often think about it. Seattle right now is, I think, maybe has completed a $4 billion bridge, which was a rational investment of between the city, the state, and the federal government. It would cost $1 billion to build a fiber optic network out to every single family in Seattle. And with that, you could run it operationally in subsidized service for low-income families without needing to build additional gimmicks into the business model in order to make it continue to cash flow, because these networks have extremely low operating costs. Now in North Dakota, as you get into the northwest parts of North Dakota, where we are at 1 and 2 people per square mile, I think it's something equivalent of 3 to 5 people per square kilometer, then you may need some operating subsidies when it takes 3 hours to reach a customer's premises to fix something, right? Like you got a tech that can only serve 1 to 3 houses per day. You may need some small operating subsidies, but in most of these areas, the fiber optic system is so efficient and you have so few problems, you don't. So as we're doing this work, I just hope people have in mind like that, you know, when we're dealing with our friends who are in the north of Manitoba, yeah, like I think it's hard to say we should run fiber out to every single premise in extremely low population densities. But for a lot of areas, it is more feasible than one might imagine, as long as we have the right policy and we have the right priorities. The comment that Bill made about the $11 million a year, that is almost certainly an underestimate of the healthcare savings that would come from the kind of network that he's envisioning. My colleague Rai here has been working on a paper for 2 years now that we're about ready to publish about healthcare benefits from these networks. And the United States healthcare system is grossly inefficient compared to the Canadian one, I will grant you. When people say something's expensive in healthcare, we'll talk to them and say, yes, like fiber optics are expensive, but like in healthcare, we waste so much money that if we could just take a fraction of that waste and use it, not like 100% of the waste, just a fraction of the waste, and we use telehealth to resolve that, we would be able to provide free service to every low-income family in the United States because of the benefits, because we spend so much on healthcare and a system that doesn't work, right? The money is out there, and we have to start, I think, thinking of this as the transformative technology it is, as opposed to limiting ourselves based on, the thinking of elected officials that might be several years out of date and still doesn't treat this in the way that it should be thought of because of the way it can lower costs. So that was what I wanted to share. I already went on a little bit longer than I meant to, but I also wanted to share something, and I'm happy to, and if anyone wants to make a comment based on that or ask questions, so whether it's me or other people in the room can certainly deal with some of these claims that I'm making. But I also wanted to share that specifically about the NDAs, the discussion about dealing with vendors. I run a podcast called Community Broadband Bits. It's available all over the place on all the common podcast hangouts. And a recent episode with Matthew Douglas from Hoopa Valley covers their transition as they're building a wireless network from not really knowing what they can ask of vendors when they're negotiating to then having a sense of that and asking vendors to come to their area, to look at the land, to have a sense of whether or not their solution will actually work, rather than just feeling like they couldn't make any demands of potential vendors. And the discussion with him is really, he's terrific. And so I think a number of people in this room might really benefit from that. So any questions or comments about that? Just generally the amount. Electric cooperatives in the United States right now are working with a variety of different partners, but the largest one that's building the fastest is building what I think is about 75,000 kilometers per year of fiber out to residents, connecting hundreds of thousands of residents in the most low rural, the most low population density areas like Mississippi, Missouri are states that are very low income and have a lot of rural areas. I think, is Phil around with a mic? We just want to make sure you use the mic for the people that might be, the people who are watching this in the future. Think of the future.
7 generations, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. I wanted to just understand the way it is in the US, because here in Canada, the railways piggyback fiber. It's a kind of a secret until you get into the taxation of it, but they have a lot of piggybacking fiber along the railway, and they've said that at times during emergencies they've been able to bridge into it. But if there's a railway near you, there is fiber in BC or in Canada, or I don't know if it's all across Canada, but I know in BC it is. Cookshamp.
Yes, and I think we need to think of this in 2 separate ways. One is, how do we get fiber to a central location within a community, which would then connect to the rest of the internet and the rest of the world? That is one challenge. And sometimes there's fiber along railways or major roads or other places where there's been done before. And then the other challenge is, once it's there, the much higher cost ultimately of connecting every last resident or business to that fiber is a challenge. In both cases, these are largely one-time costs, generational investments that don't need to be made. I think a lot of elected officials and other people who aren't steeped in the economics think of this and like, well, it's going to be fantastically expensive to build. And I'll say probably yes. Although the benefits are extreme. And one of the things that's not appreciated is that it is not an ongoing cost then. It will largely generate enough revenue to pay for itself or most of its costs. And that is a smart investment. What people need to be on guard for is investments that require new money year after year after year at increasing levels. Those are the kinds of things that bankrupt governments, as opposed to smart one-time investments that unlocks educational opportunities, telehealth. Telemental health is one of these things that I think, if we massively invested in telemental health and made it easy, the gains to the economy would be significant, like far more than the cost of making sure that got built out, just because we lose so much from the inefficiencies of people who are wrestling with problems that many people in this room probably have and would benefit from having a talk with a professional occasionally, right? It's not just a small part of the population, is what I'm saying.
Hi, Chris. I just wanted to speak to what James Hobart just mentioned, and that is the rights of way issue in Canada. We know that fiber optic backhaul exists in Northern Ontario, for example, along the railway tracks, along the transmission lines, and it's existed for decades. The issue is it's owned by private companies, and we have we don't have enough backhaul in Northern Ontario. So, you know, we're trying to figure out a way, well, how do we get more backhaul? Do we need to build more backhaul? But the backhaul exists, but it's not being shared. That's one issue. The other issue is, my understanding is the CRTC does not have jurisdiction over rights of way issues. So that's another issue. We need to find out who that is. Who do we need to be talking to? And so I guess I just wanted to bring that up because that's something that I'm looking into. And when I talked to a lawyer about it, Sherry Brandt out of Toronto, she's a First Nations lawyer that's kind of aware of this issue. She says a lot of First Nations don't even know that they can ask the question. So I think that's something we could look at for a policy recommendation.
Absolutely. And I think in the United States, we have privately owned fiber that was put in with private companies. And my personal politics suggests that it's problematic and would require significant forethought as to whether or not we would have government policy that would force them to share that under certain circumstances. We also have a lot of fiber that was built with federal dollars for specific purposes, education and healthcare being one. And those networks are often legally prohibited from being used for other purposes. And that is something that could be revisited without a lot of the sticky questions about the role of the private sector and government regulation.
And the other thing too, Chris, is these fiber optic lines were largely built with public dollars, and they have garnered the revenue from that for decades.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's time for them to share it.
And I think it's a sort of public conversation we're not having. Like, I mean, I don't think we've lost this conversation. I think we haven't had it. Anyone ready for a break?
Questions, comments? Going once. Going twice. What say you, Chris? Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Break time, everybody. Stretch your legs, move about, have some coffee, get some fresh air. Hope you saw that sunrise this morning. to sit at their seats. I also encourage people to mix about, sit at different tables if you haven't already, meet new people. It's a good idea. Thank you. We're going to have our Alaskan family come up and talk a bit about what they're doing. I introduce to you Julian and Brittany. Can we give them a round of applause, please? You guys ready?
Sure.
Take
Yeah,
it-
sure.
Are those mics good?
Hello, hello.
Yeah, do you want to go first or? Okay. Hi, my name is Julian Achilinguk Jacobs. I'm from Mumtitlak, Alaska, which is a small western village in the area of what says Chilista, the little orange corner over there. And so we kind of came together for National Tribal Emergency Management Council because, well, not just because of the need for emergency response throughout tribal lands, but as far as the Alaska chapter and covering this huge state, we had a lot of approaches to make sure we were able to put in emergency communication. So from infrastructure, broadband, power, energy, renewables, as well as a number of other projects that we want to make sure that we're able to use for remote sensing to data collection, and also to kind of lead the way for how are our tribes going to be resilient, but also to be mobile as well. So next slide. Okay, so just we'll go through these slides really quick. So these are the different regions that we have for Alaska. So Atna region, we have large amounts of space to develop broadband with 28 million acres. Next slide. And each one of these areas and regions have their own different topography, different cartography that we need, and different mapping solutions that we need to find out. So from the Adda region, and then I think the next one should be Arctic slope. This is going to be one of the harder challenges because of the Brooks Range, the mountainous region. It's all Arctic. It's a difficult terrain, and it's also not very populated as well. However, there's going to be a couple slides later on where it shows that the difference between Prudhoe Bay and Barrow and what's called the National Vulnerability Index is because that Prudhoe Bay is well developed. They have food, water for all the oil drillers, the infrastructure needs for what's happening for man camps that are up there. But then if you go to the other villages, there's absolutely nothing. You go to Kaktovik, you go to Point Lay, other villages. It's really remote, a couple hundred miles away. You cannot get there by boat. You can't get there by, a truck or anything else like that. You have to fly, and it leaves us extremely vulnerable too. So, but the measurement for the National Vulnerability Index is primarily predicated upon Prudhoe Bay, the oil-bearing nation, or not nation, but area. Okay, next slide. Bering Straits region, same kind of thing. This is where pretty much where we had a Typhoon Merbuk, which was a massive. I'm not sure exactly how big, but it covered the entire state of Alaska.
It was 1,000 miles along the coast of damage that was caused, and on top of that, a lot of our industries are collapsing. There is a 90% of the crab population has gone missing or is unaccounted for, and so they had to shut down those 2 seasons, which will hit Alaska very harshly. And on top of that, about 80% of our GDP is in oil and extractive industries, and they are closing down coal mines because they're not as productive, and they want to develop on very sensitive land or around areas where we have fishing, spawning area at the beginning of rivers. And so when we're talking about broadband and the costs in Alaska especially, we need to talk about how much it's going to cost us if we don't build out. And similar to Canada, there's some communities where you could be 3 hours out from emergency services, from a hospital. Our teacher shortage is so bad that we started outsourcing to the Philippines, I've heard, along with nurses. And so when we talk about broadband, it's why we need to have it, it's why we need to do it. The image of being able to teach 5 villages with 1 native teacher for, let's say, math. I've heard stories about where it's so bad in communities that they have the art teacher working on math, and so the need is ever so real.
Yeah, it's astounding, like what we have to deal with out there, and the challenges are ever present too. So can we go to the next slide real quick? And we can actually go through the slides pretty quickly because there's a couple of different other portions if we can put in. But as far as for broadband and what we want to help and assist in building is for telehealth, telemedicine as well. That's extremely important for us because and for us even down in the Southwest, it might not be 3 hours, it might be like 2 weeks because of the remote nature, but also the storm systems that go in there. So between October and September, October, November, for the Southwest region, like the Bristol Bay region, and you're trying to get out to the Aleutian chain, those are extremely difficult to get to. There might be 2 weeks where you can get the next flight. It might be 3 weeks that might be the next flight. And these regions are extremely remote, extremely under-resourced, and extremely underfunded too. So where we're able to leverage that, is with, from broadband into, complete cultural competency to cultural context on how we build, and to make sure we're able to not only have our people work and build these systems for broadband, but to have the trainings within. And so for what NCMC, what we're trying to do and what we're building on is emergency operations sensors, and those will be in the slides later. But I don't have a presentation ready. This is kind of last minute, but we'll be able to get to it later. What the intershelter is, the EOC, is that it's a 20-foot dome basically, and we're able to house from broadband to telehealth, telemedicine, and to be able to establish our networks with bandwidth, with partnerships with APU and a number of other organizations. So when we have our ability to get in, we're trying to figure out what is the best way. And to be here is like to learn what is the best way to put broadband in. So when we're able to have these remote regions, then we're able to push in as much as we can. Once we have the EOC established, then we're able to also do a lot of other work. It's the renewables that we want to put in. It's the remote sensing that we want to put in. Because the challenges to Alaska is that we have 1.5 million metric tons of permafrost around the Arctic that will be melting. And this is methane. This is 5 times as much more potency than carbon dioxide. So this is a really big threat that we need to have remote sensing ability to have data transmission, because we need to not only monitor, but how do we impact as well as keep it not only frozen, because there are solutions for it, but to work and partner with everybody that we can to keep that also in the ground. Yeah.
Alaska also has huge potential for renewable energy. It's just the interests have not been there, or lobbying has prevented people from doing that. But there are success stories. If you look at Kodiak for the last 20 years, their energy bills have been the same because they have hydro, solar, and wind energy. Right now, there are people that are looking at the Cook Inlet Sound. It's one of the top 5 locations in the world for tidal energy, with the ocean going in and out. And so there are communities that do this, and this will also have a huge impact because some of those really rural communities, they're spending 50% of their income on heating their homes in winters. I just learned about this presentation like 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
I'll just introduce myself really quick too. Brittany Woods-Orson. I'm Koyukon Dene from Rampart, Alaska, in the interior along the Yukon River. I work for two nonprofits that are statewide, being Alaska Public Interest Research Group and Native Movement. They're social justice focused, and they're also a part of the Just Transition Collective that's happening in the state. And it's bringing together people who are looking at how do we transition from extractive, exploitive economies to regenerative, renewable, sustainable, community-minded. We have people who are building solar in communities. We have mariculture happening, seaweed that is projected to continue growing. We do have tribal ISPs that are trying to serve, and also to explain what was on the slides. As Alaska Native people, we have our cultural identity, our tribal administration, tribal village corporation. That was our regional corporation, so I'm part of Doyon and the Interior. And we also have state nonprofits and state agencies that oversee all this. So there's a lot of entities and they're not necessarily working together. So that's why I'm really excited to be a part of my nonprofits that are working more with people who want to share the vision and slowly get our community, because as we don't have broadband, it's so hard to communicate with one another. I have tried to reach out to villages that the emails bounce back, the turnover rates are high. The person doesn't trust me due to history, which is understandable. And we have had success in the past of bringing people together for important times like this, and I slowly see it happening. We just connected and we have a lot of synergy in both the work, so I'm really excited to see what happens even from this.
Yeah. We could probably move past these slides. I think the other folder we could probably open up. So the way, hopefully we'll be able to kind of explain how we have these corporations, we have these different segments, is that in 1971, Alaska Native Claim Settlement had been opened up, which was to basically connect and work with the federal government and with Nixon's administration to basically open up this pipeline. And so from north of Alaska and Prudhoe Bay into all the way into Valdez, the southern, south central section of it, they needed to figure out a way, how are we going to divvy up the land and how are we going to make sure that we're able to work with Alaska Natives and create entities that can handle this kind of infrastructure. So they split us up. They put us into corporations and they also put us into tribes. And so the maps that were on there is particularly between corporations that have all the land and then tribes that have sovereignty over air, basically. But as far as the components of how we're able to try to match and build them together is a challenge that we need to fix. And to be able to implement, infrastructure, to implement, everything that we need is trying to marry everything together. But the solutions that we're looking for is renewables, to work with the corporations, to work with the tribes. We have 229 tribes in Alaska, which is a vast amount. So we have a lot of weight and we have a lot of ability to put in for policy recommendations all the way into implementation for these systems, specifically with the infrastructure needs for the tribe. So each of these tribes, we can go to the next slide, it'll have not only names, but within the names themselves are particularly about who they are. From whether it's Kaneknak, or it's going to be Kuichlinuk on the southwest, Utqiagvik. And each area has particular regions, not just regions, but geographies, and how we hunt and how we fish and how do we gather off the land. And for my people, I'm Yupik and Inupik, and the term is Yuk, which is person, and then real. So we're real people. And the term Mantitlak is means people of the smokehouse, and so people of the smokehouse is a part of who we are, which means that our smokehouse is built from a kazgik, and the kazgik itself is a unique piece of but technology, which that. The way we lived, because it's 70 below outside, is we live underneath the ground. We live inside the permafrost. And so we'd have these subterranean dwellings underneath the permafrost and within the permafrost in order for us to live, because it's 32 degrees, inside there, but it's 50 below outside if you go outside. And the way they were shaped is unique. And the way that we put it together is that you have winter entrance, which is a sump that goes down. The cold will go down there. and then the warm air is up here in this dome situation. And the reason why we wanted to also add that is because it's part of learning. And so the actual home is part of a dome feature, which is, it symbolizes the woman's womb, the first place that we learn and grow. And so we also, you know, go under and then we go inside as meant to learn. So that offered us a lot of solutions for our EOCs too. And so our EOCs are shaped basically off the same premise for the way that the qazgik is made, because it is frozen inside. And so we're like, how do we do food security, food sovereignty, and can we use this technology again? And so now we're being able to implement qazgiks, which are subterranean, and we're able to store 750,000 pounds of food within that system to store it. And in the north too, as well, for Utqiaqavik, it's called, we call them sigloaks, which basically are housing for whale meat. And so an entire whale would fit basically from that wall to pretty much like right up here. So we have to be able to store that food, you know. The protein needs for up north, you know, because we can't have fox, you can't eat like these kinds of meats. You have to store whale meat in order to be able to live up there. But the qazgik sigloaks are part of the technology we're going to be using to make sure we have food resilience and food security for that measure for when we have these things like THU, because it's not going to stop. So we're going back to our traditions, we're going back to our roots, but also we're implementing low carbon techniques too to keep the food not only stored, but it's well worth it.
Another term for this is called remembering forward, where it's kind of the paradox of returning to our culture, but in this new time sense. And that's another big thing with the Just Transition Collective. These communities, if you try to fly out food, we're talking like and they fly out non-renewable resources. We're talking like $9 for a gallon of gas, $9 for a gallon of milk, and the prices all go from that. And
yeah, it just I've gone on trips up the Yukon, up the Kuskokwim. I mean, and it's going to cost $1,500 to get from one village to another village in gas itself. You know, we have to figure this out, and I think we figured out a couple things for our renewables, or the projects. It won't be in the slideshow, but I'm definitely willing to show what we're working on too later on, or at least I'll give you my email and we can share information, share data and stuff like that. But getting back to we can move to the next slide too. Getting back to the EOC itself, and I liked what Rogers and the ladies were saying earlier when it came to how do they integrate missing, murdered Indigenous women too. So we partnered with Alaska Native Women's Resource Center, which is throughout all of Alaska, in which we're able to help and keep the lights on with their ability to act as a technical assistance center. Also for the women that are there, but also to integrate not only our programs, but technical assistance centers to have people, gain skills, to have women gain skills, young, old, and also to partner with groups to be able to use technology like Barefoot College, solar grandmother programs, where we're able to train ammas, uppas on how to build solar panels and how to add this into the microgrids that we're working on. So there's a lot of things in there. So that's what a basic EOC would look like. And we can kind of go fast forward through a lot of these. That's a nice one, but that's more of the livable part. This is for one of the relief areas, basically instant Arctic winter shelters that they're able to live in because of, during that typhoon that happened last month, 100 homes were wiped out. And these are, real people, with problems that we have people in Nepakhekak that are living with 10 people in a home, and villages that are just complete. There's no economy, there's nothing else. And we're trying to not only create solutions, but when we're able to dispatch these, then we also are able to add a couple other features that would have the EOCs, would have the telemedicine, the telehealth, the work with Yukon Kuskokwim Health Corporation or Indian Health Services. And then we can move to the next slide. That's one of them that survived past Typhoon Merbuk. It was actually hit by a boulder, and it was submerged in about 2 feet of seawater when it was roughly 35 degrees outside. and it survived. It was fine, you know. And these are the ones we're working on that would house the technology, people as relief shelters, but also to, I mean, it's just an elegant solution for how we're trying to put everything together, I believe. Next slide. Okay, and we can move through those actually. Those are just different versions and how they look. This is what we were supposed to put in the, so this is one of the 100 Times articles about how the bill came through. We kind of covered that with ANCSA too. I want to add anything there? To the AFX stuff.
To understand also how complicated it can be in Alaska and how it's kind of a case study always in its own is Alaska is the size of a third of the United States. We have about 1.2 people per mile. We have 13 main language groups all having different dialects. And when they made ANCSA, it was because they found gold, and it was set up, you know, as it was being made, there's elders who have talked about since it was created that it was set up to divide our people and to benefit capitalism, because there's some things written where the corporations have to continue making money. And so as these new generations come up, as these new problems come up, and we have to be realistic about climate change, it's going to be a time of recreating, reevaluating, and also resiliency. And so even right now, the corporations, there's 2 corporations that got $50 million to build out broadband, and they are working with telecoms in the to do that infrastructure, but they were also prioritized before the tribes. Both of those regions had tribes who were going to serve those same people. And so moving forward, who's going to make the money from this? Who's it going to benefit? And also, they're only serving about 20 villages out of 200 something, and there's going to be like 180 without remaining. So this is just to the reality of the situation and to critique it, and like, how do we move forward from here, and how are we going to reach those unserved communities, and who has to come together to solve these issues? And we're going to figure out that between we're going to work together and make some solutions as well.
Yeah. Can we go to the next slide? We could, yeah, we can move on from those. That's the typical setup of the series. This is one of the impacts from Typhoon Merbuk. So the same picture that had the EOC by itself, that's the devastation it caused next door to it. So they're really strong. They're able to withstand, you know, 90-mile-per-hour winds. They're able to withstand and also be set in concrete, but they're also mobile because not just in the future, we have to be mobile. Our villages are not only sinking, but the understructure of it all is also melting. So we have to become able to go with what we need for mapping, what we need to create our communications for broadband. We have to be mobile completely. But we can go to the next slide. Yeah, we could probably pass all those. The R factor and these things are amazing. They're past Fairbanks, above the Arctic Circle. You know, and we're outfitting them with compost. We can load them in C-130s to dispatch quickly, and along the lines of, you know, why we're having to put together EOCs combined with our qazqiks is that for the formation of, you know, food security, food sovereignty, as to be able to hold that food, we can also keep it in a state that from either 37 degrees to 32 degrees with between 40 to 80% humidity, is that you can snap celery at March after it was grown and harvested in September. You know, these are ways that we've been able to keep our food fresh and to keep us alive throughout, you know, thousands of years since time immemorial. So these are systems that we have to make sure that we're intact because of what we're seeing. Then we can move to the next slide. To tie all those in together is just how we're able to work as emergency management, but also to implement what we need and how we're able to communicate. I mean, We lost power, you know, in several villages for a week. We lost water capacity. There's still no fresh water in, I believe in Nunamikwa and Shaktuluk and Unaklik, two other different villages still are having to wrestle and build back up their airplane strips. I mean, these are real challenges, you know, to us having to make the decision whether or not we actually abandon our own homelands or we have to find a way to put it all together amongst ourselves. And so we're really wanting to partner and really wanting to learn and really wanting to get together to not only tackle but provide solutions for it, especially with broadband and everybody in here that we need help with. But let's go ahead and move past a couple slides there. And so, yeah, that's all of us for NTMC. So we cover all of the United States, but my part is the Alaska chapter. We can move past that. And that is right there. That's situated in Tiqiaq. Tiqiaq means crooked finger. So the way that it's sent out is the Isthmus archipelago out in the, which is that Norton Sound or? I think, yeah, it's Norton Sound, but it's in North. And I did a film out there for a little bit. It's called Store Outside Your Door. And we were able to go out there, pick what's called guachak and guachchik, which are two, there's a lot of it around here, but to pick this food and to live in this area, that's what a general glazgik looks like. Those are whale bones that are the structure. So those are whale ribs, and they sit about roughly 5 to 6 feet in height. So people still lived in there until the 1960s. In our area, we lived in glazgiks all the way up into the 70s and 80s and so forth. But we could go to the next slide. And that's a typical glazgik, or different names call them glazgi, galchi, glazgimi. It's just, that's what it looked like inside. We can move to the next slide. And that's what the glazgik will look like nowadays. So that's one version of it too, which houses around roughly, it can house roughly around 1 million pounds of food inside there. And their facilities are futuristic. I mean, it's low carbon imprints and so forth, but that's the portions of what we're doing as NCEMC. I want to move on into the idea not the idea, but how do we implement broadband? And I actually have a lot more questions for everybody in here than I'd rather present on some of the stuff here. Did that come off? Good. Okay. For people, how many have done work inside the actual Arctic or past the Arctic Circle? Has anybody done any of that kind of work up there for broadband? Northwest Territories, permafrost. You have, Sally? Okay. What challenges did you? I'm sorry. Before, is that okay? Okay. What challenges did you have to doing that? Yeah. Sorry.
That everything you're saying, where I'm listening to everything that you're saying, and some of the challenges that we are facing are definitely related to climate. Installing poles in Muskeg, which is
two.
Okay. Yeah, installing in order to bring the fiber line in, the hydro poles had to be erected in Muskeg. So you had to build huge cribs of rock and stone around them. Otherwise, they would tilt because the Muskeg is very swampy, and yeah. It's freezing less and less each year. To bring supplies in our winter roads. I can remember when I first moved out of Wapiskat, the Winter Road would be open for 3 months a year. Now we're lucky to get 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So the other problem we have is the way the rivers are moving now. The erosion of the banks can cause the hydropoles to actually tilt and fall into the river. That was the situation we had a few years ago. And when you just have one fiber line coming up the coast and all of your communications are dependent on that one line, that cuts out communications, can cut out communications for a long time, weeks, days. So those were some of the challenges that we face.
Nice.
Oh, and of course, the peat is melting. So the carbon dioxide from the peat is being more and more is being put into the air every year.
Yeah. Got anything?
We're coming to the end of our time. So I just wanted to say my focus with my nonprofits, we're not building out, and since there are a lot of entities that are working on infrastructure, I'm trying to focus on digital literacy to work alongside our corporations and tribal ISPs who are doing this work. And if you're interested in the Just Transition Collective, you could just look up Just Transition Alaska. We have videos on YouTube of the different projects. You can look up Alaska Public Interest Research Group or Native Movement. A lot of amazing work happening in Alaska despite all of the challenges, and just want to work with more people and try to get connected with more tribes. I just got back from Alaska Federation of Natives conventions last week, and I connected with a lot of rural people, which has been so difficult. So I'm really excited going into 2023. Do you have any particular asks or anything before our time ends?
Yeah, a quick story in regards to like how do we implement, from traditional knowledge into broadband and so forth. So when you're talking about for muskegs and as far as like permafrost tilting, so we know of course that they call them drunken trees, in which the trees are drinking the permafrost. But as far as like for we have an elder advisory council. But I remember when I was a kid too. There was a time I came on the river. It was, just frozen. I was out manukking, which is ice fishing. And so what happened was I saw one of the elders out there, and I, saw him leaning up against the river, and he was listening to the river. I was like, what are you doing? And he was like, I'm listening to the river. He's like, it's like, okay. I didn't know what to think. And what he was listening for was the different currents in between. You have a higher fast current, and you have a lower stagnant kind of current. And what he was listening for is because pike travel in a certain way that also goes into these different areas. And so he was listening for where the pike were going to eat the king salmon and also the nook, the chinook and whatever else. And when they eat them there, the salmon that comes from over there, then you don't have as much salmon that comes out to the stream. So he was listening for different areas on where he's going to put his fish camp, because when you have that foundation of salmon that goes back into the stream, goes back into their habitat, the soil stays, and the soil stays because the foundation of the food itself dissolves, reinforces the trees. The trees are able to also bring in the birds, which the birds are feasting on the berries. The berries are also being repopulated by not only our muskrats and beavers, but foxes come in, and then the foxes help shape and determine the way the birds move. And the way the birds move, they typically help shape the way that the caribou come in. So we're all dependent on all these systems that are capable of determining and showing that the land teaches us how to live, and to be able to look and see, well, this is where permafrost is going to be. This is how the river is going to stay intact. This is the way that you should set up a fish camp in the next 6-7 years or so. And so we're able to basically kind of incorporate not only our traditional knowledge, but this is how we'll be resilient in the future on where we set and look and site map and everything too. So it's portions of that, but also as Alaska natives too, there's a tool I don't know if I should talk about this one. Yeah, it's a bit brutal, but it's just a harsh climate. You take a piece of baleen that it's from a whale's mouth, and so the baleen itself, it becomes pliable once you put it in a cook. Cook is rendered seal meat that turns into oil. So the oil itself, it's able to basically, you soak that piece of baleen and you make, you sharpen the ends and you cinch it down like a accordion. You wrap it with sinew from the interior, and then you wrap the other side of that with sinew from the southwest. So we're covering like the size of several thousand miles. And so working together, we're able to basically use this tool, and it would be attached to a tree. When it's attached to a tree, the wolf will come by and eat it, thinking it's got all these smells. It's got moose, it's got whale, it's got all this stuff. And what will happen is that the stomach acid of the wolf will dissolve the sinew and it'll impale it, like from the inside out, and which allows for the wolves themselves do cry out in pain, which allows alerts the other wolves, and the wolves will stay away from that area, which creates safe passage for caribou to come in through there, in which we follow that. So as far as the technology we have to use and to work in this harsh climate, it's a brutal one, but it's also a clever one too. But it's a like alien. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
I think that's just amazing. And I love your words about the land teaches us how to live. And I know a lot of our communities have been, colonized. And my question was, so you talked about how the elder was listening to the water and listening to the river and the flow, and so my question is, like, is that taught? Like, is that a teaching that is taught to the today's generation and the ones that have missed it? Like, I know there's a huge gap in our cultural training and traditions, so I just wanted to know if that was something that had to be retaught into our system, into your system.
I've recently began being told that, our knowledge never dies, nothing truly ever dies, and instead we started reshaping as it goes to sleep. And there are stories across Indigenous peoples of like bringing back long lost languages and long lost histories. And this is also happening in the way we look at the sky and how we were able to read the stars. And so either of us can't truly know what's happening across Alaska at any time because it's so vast and so much is going on. But there are people who really stayed to the land, and I'm thinking about people my age who know how to completely sustain themselves, and all this information will continue. Sometimes we have to go out and we have to dream about it. Sometimes we have to go out on the land, and I've heard stories of even young girls. Someone told me about these girls who were twins, and they just had natural healing powers that no one had taught them and they were just born with. And so continues to bring me hope, thinking of that in that framework.
Yeah, it is hard to say. We still have a lot of language speakers, at least in our area and the Yupik area, and across different vast areas of Alaska. It's definitely hard to get a gauge on who's doing what. I mean, for what I believe broadband can do is definitely leverage some of that though too. Because cultural, teachings, new technology, language immersion, things like that, we can definitely push back and get those implemented. So, but teachings like that, like deep understandings, like how we're able to hunt and fish, and to work with what we've had and what we're dealing with now, we need this more than ever because it is shifting. Things are changing. We need to keep up to date with, from our villages up north to the interior to the southwest and around here, especially over here. It's the same thing over here as it is up in Alaska. So sharing knowledge, sharing data, and then sharing like I mean, Inuktitut is not as close as to Inupiaq. Inuvialuit is similar to Inupiaq as well. I mean, we're all really connected, and who we have here is all we have. You know, all we have is each other. And so we keep on working on these methods to teach and to implement and keep the our structures in place. And other teachings that we've had from the past in the Kazakh all the way into today. So we're still working on it. Yeah. Koyana. Any other questions? Yeah.
That be all? Do we have any other questions? I'm gonna move to the next one if we don't, but with that, I want to thank both of you for on short notice coming up today. Thank you so much. Inspirational in a challenging situation. Hi, thank you. Thank you so much, Julian. What was that? Brittany, was that remembering forward? Yeah, that is what resonates, remembering forward for me personally. Thank you. Okay, so next up to the stage, we're going to keep it moving here because we got about 15 minutes till lunch. So we're going to have an update from the First Mile Connectivity Consortium, FMCC. So if Bill Murdoch and Sally and I think Rob McMahon may be joining us virtually, although I'm not sure. Could you please come up to the stage, although I don't even see Bill here. Do you know where Bill? Yeah, he's right there. You haven't seen him for a bit? Okay. And do we have... Or were we going to play a video? Was it going to be a video, Mark, or was it going to be FMCC? Do you need time? Okay. And Jason will step on with you? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Sally and Jason are coming up. Can we give them a round of applause, please? Thank you. Thank you for bearing with us.
There should be some slides. Is Missy here? No, there's supposed to be slides.
Okay.
Yeah. Bill had to leave, but he said that Mark switched.
Okay.
Oh, good. All right. Test. Okay. So the First Mile Connectivity Consortium is a group of intermediary regional organizations, and they are listed there. Our member organizations are the First Nation Technology Council from BC, represented here by Rhea Doolin and Tanya Smith. Clear Sky Connections is Bill Murdoch. Broadband Communications North is Jason Neepin. KNET Services is Jesse Fiddler. Ottawa First Nations by David Paul Etchepeniskam. Myself, Western James Bay Telecom Network, EU Communications Network, which is in Quebec. That's Alfred, he had to leave. The First Nations Education Council, represented by Tim Whiteduck, and the Atlantic Canada First Nations Help Desk, which is represented by Alan McKenzie. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we've managed to pull together over the years a group of intermediary organizations that are national in scope. They're, well, across Turtle Island. Next slide, please. And we also have a website, and on this website we have stories from each of these communities about how connectivity has assisted in their lives. Next slide, please. So who we are, the First Mile project, it was developed in 2012, and it grew out of a research partnership that was established through the First Nations Innovation Project. So the project website that we have, it documents a lot of research that's been done actually from, I think the earliest was 2000, and that was the National Broadband Project that was Brian Beaton, the former executive director of KNET, was actually sat on that. And the national broadband strategy did come out of that meeting of about 30 strategic partners that sat down and came up with that policy. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. A lot of research has been done and is on that website. So if you are working on a project and you're looking for documentation to support what you're trying to put forward, and for example, on a funding document, there are documents there that you can use to support yourself.
If I could add something. No, just to jump in here. We did a strategic planning session in Montreal in July. It was a day and a half. It was very insightful. We meet monthly. We have Zoom calls. For myself, new in this industry within the last year, it was very educational. I learned about spectrum. I didn't really know too much about the industry. It's been a wealth of information. Great team. Everybody has the vested interest to help our people, and we're all not for profit. One other story I'd like to share with you is we're the technicians that do the work. We have boots on the ground. We have customers, and we're operating. Currently, there's another organization that's being put together by some politicians. The Assembly of First Nations is creating another organization where my understanding is that the regional chiefs are nominating somebody from each region within the AFN, and they're going to go seek funding. I'm thinking from ISK, I'm assuming, to advocate for connectivity for Indigenous people. We had a meeting with them in Montreal to figure out, okay, who's in this space and what's our purpose. As the boots on the ground, FMCC, we have technicians, we're actually doing the work. And we see some chiefs being appointed to a board to go travel around the country to advocate for us. So we would like to see it work. Is it feasible? I'm not so sure. If I was a policymaker, I would suggest that we empower FMCC versus having some chiefs fly around the country and spending millions of dollars for what? The work that we're already doing. I think we could work collaboratively, but that's what's going on right now within our space. So I just want to share that information.
So can I have the next slide, please? I'm at a bit of a disadvantage here because I can't really, this is in the way. So I'm going to just stand up. And so this is the roles of our regional organizations. This is what we do. We advocate for and administer digital infrastructure and services on behalf of Indigenous member communities. We represent to government. the needs of Indigenous communities. We deliver public services and economic development opportunities through our organizations, and we mediate between local communities and external entities like government funders or corporations. The last one is a really big one. It's we're moving more and more into that area now. Next slide, please. So we're a not-for-profit, as Jason said. We have, I think we have about 7 directors now. Our president is Bill Murdoch. Vice president is Tim Whiteduck. Dr. Rob McMahon is our secretary, and I'm the treasurer. We have research associates, Heather Hudson from Alaska, Trish Tasso is in Quebec, and Ben Klass, Franz Seibel, and Fenwick McKelvey. Next slide, please. So our statement of principles is that we're a collective voice that respects each member's right to speak widely and freely on its own behalf. And we try to facilitate spaces where communities gain a substantial voice in the formation of telecommunications policy and regulations. So when we have our meetings, the first thing we do is we do a roundtable. So Jason reports on what he's doing. Tim reports on what he's doing. I report on what Western James Bay is doing. So that's, and a lot of good things come out of that roundtable that we do. And by supporting each other, we can actually move forward. Next slide, please. So we had to, our articles of incorporation, this is our purpose. Primarily, we are more involved, I think, with the first 4. Advisory services to First Nations that need assistance in getting projects off the ground. Research and writing services, we do a lot of writing. We get involved with a lot of CRTC applications and submissions, and with ISET as well. So, and we aren't doing that much in digital and multimedia production, but I think Bill is doing quite a bit in that area now. He's working with a lot of youth. Next slide, please.
Yeah, just to jump on that, I said for the spectrum portion, we are submitting comments and concerns as a collective on, I guess, Canada's behalf, First Nations, sorry, Indigenous people. But as a group, the technicians, it's very dry. It hurts the brain to do the ISET process. And, you know, we have competent people, and we're answering their questions, and we're advocating for more inclusion. Free spectrum is what we're shooting for, but we are making the case. Yeah, go ahead.
So this first mile theory of change is something that came out of the First Nations Innovation Project, which ran from 2005 to 2015. And it's hard to read. Where we start is digital networks designed and built with region/community needs as a starting point. And this is something that, as community networks, and we can ask this of the CRTC. When a company or a corporation applies to do a build out to First Nations, what tends to happen is they don't start at the first mile. They don't start in the community. They beef up their core services, their core infrastructure, and then what happens is at the end of the project, there's very little left. So they don't get to the community that they said they're going to serve. They tend to go back to the CRTC and say, well, we're out of money. They submit a change request. But what we're advocating for and what we're going to be talking to the CRTC about is when someone applies, make sure they're going to start the first mile first. Start there. And then the next is that there's regional and local ownership and control of the digital infrastructure. So the communities are in charge of their own infrastructure, looking after it, and also data storage. Operating costs for anchor tenants support connectivity. I'll be talking about that a little later on today, about how that's how we funded our network. We brought in first, we brought in connectivity to the anchor institutions. And with the money we got from them over the years, we were able to take part and fund the Fiber to the Home project. Training local support staff and community jobs, and sustainable digital technologies to meet regional and community needs. So sustainable and scalable, which is what Matt was talking about this morning. Make sure that your network can grow. Next slide.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So this is prior to the First Mile Connectivity Consortium being incorporated. In 2005, there was research done on, it was a program called RICTA, Research on ICT with Aboriginal Communities. And there was research done on Videocom and First Nations innovation. And these are the universities that were involved. Next slide, please. So this is, I guess the top line is where, that's where your anchor institutions connectivity is so important, along the top line, and then it develops out to the second line and the third line. That's how you can build out your network and what it can do for you. This was prepared by Judy White Duck at the Assembly of First Nations. Next slide, please. So this is some research that was done by Brian Beaton and Susan O'Donnell. And you can see here the paradox where urban communities, for example, they have the cheapest digital services, whereas remote communities, it's the most expensive. Urban communities have the best digital infrastructure, and remote communities have inadequate digital infrastructure. So it just speaks that how important it is that the remote communities, the build out needs to happen there first, and then you build back out to the urban center. Next slide, please. So here's some examples of what we've done to date. Next slide. So we've done a lot of research in these four areas. There's, because we work with people in the community, there's a lot of trust that's been built up over the years. Any data that's presented and produced is shared with the community. And we reach out for people in the community to author the research with us. And the research we use, again, is we can cite it as support for the when we do a CRTC intervention. Next slide, please. So this is just sort of a sample of how we work, sort of a visual. We're all volunteer. It's we do get some money from our research, but it's not much. Sometimes it pays to not get paid, because then you can say more of what you would like to say. Next slide, please. So these are examples of regulatory interventions we've done over the last few years. As you can see, we've been involved with the review of Northwest Tel's modernization plan. I see it's cropping up here. It's cropped up again. We just made a filing just last month. So it gives you an idea of what sorts of consultations we've been involved in. We don't get involved in every consultation, but we feel that, you know, we have some comment to make, we will make it. Next slide, please. So this is an example. In 2016, I believe, the CRTC did a view of basic telecom services, and they asked these questions. So when we participated below, what we provided them with, you know, evidence on that there was a lack of reliable and affordable broadband in Indigenous and northern regions. We were able to prove that because we had studies to support it. We did highlights on the role of Indigenous organizations as providers and not simply consumers of broadband services. Because believe it or not, CRT wasn't really aware that there were Indigenous organizations that were actually running their own networks. And then we were instrumental, we proposed a Northern Infrastructure and Services Fund. Next slide, please. So this is our group. We were at the Basic Service Objective hearings in April of 2016. From left to right is Dr. Heather Hudson from the University of Alaska, Dr. Rob McMahon from the University of Alberta, Penny Carpenter, who was the executive director of KNET. Then there's Tim Whiteduck from First Nations Technology Council, and then a gentleman I don't recognize who he is. So, next slide, please. So we proposed the Northern Infrastructure and Services Fund. That was our proposal to the CRTC. And it would be a new fund linked to new sources of industry revenue and all these other things, governed by an accountable, transparent body that includes Northerners and that prioritized underserved communities. We didn't get everything that we asked for, but we got a few things. So next slide, please. So should be a couple there. I can't really see it. There's a couple there that have little red stars beside it. We were able to get those things. I think it was all qualified providers can apply. So that was a big one because I think prior to that, Indigenous providers had to prove and go through a bunch of benchmarks, but they under this provision, they could apply now, even though they were an Indigenous provider. And I'm not sure about the rest. Rob prepared these slides for me, but these are other things that came out of the that CRTC decision. But prior to this, you know, when you make an application to the CRTC, you are allowed to appear before them. And I think prior to this, they had never heard from an Indigenous telecom organization. So they were very appreciative of the fact that the First Mile was there. And to this day, we get requests from the CRTC and from ISET saying, when a proposal comes out saying, are you going to respond? Like they're asking to hear from us. So we have that reputation, we have that credibility with the regulatory network. Next slide, please. So these are other policy activities that we do. We're getting involved more on the, well, we actually started talking about spectrum way back in 2014. We submitted 2 submissions then. And then these are other work that we have done through the years. Next slide, please. I think I've already seen that one. Is there another slide after that? Another slide after that? Okay. Oh, so these are some of the publications that we produced, and these are available on our website. And so there's the document on digital technology adoption in northern and remote Indigenous communities in Canada. A guide to federal funding for Indigenous broadband. And then this is mapping, the document that we produced on mapping. So these have all been, you know, we've gotten some funding to do these, to create these publications. Next slide. So we've just, we have a free online course, and it's about 13 modules. It takes a bit of time, but we've just completely overhauled it. And what it does is it teaches someone new to the space about the work that we do. And it's actually a credit course at the University of Alberta. And then we've attended the Indigenous Connectivity Summit. We've done conference presentations, and we've also produced news articles. You know, the Wire Report sometimes comes to us and asks us for comment. We did provide comment on Jenna's recent Spectrum Unceded article that came out in the Wire Report. But the other thing about the free online course, I would really like to see it as an audible podcast. There's some absolutely amazing research and information in there. Next slide, please. So these are just a sample of our key policy positions, and we're just huge on supporting Indigenous engagement in policy and regulatory decision making, like just providing the platform so that those ideas can flow from those communities. Next slide, please. Yeah, any questions? And I don't know how we're doing for time, but I should let Jason speak. I was at a disadvantage because I couldn't really read the slides.
Thank you. Do we have any quick questions? I know we're in the lunchtime, and I'm sorry, and thank you for everyone's patience, and thanks for that. But do we have any questions or comments? Quick one, yeah, here.
I just want a chance to chat after.
Oh, you want a chance? Okay.
How can you support that to reinforce what you're saying to help with that bill? I guess, hi. Thanks for the presentation. I wouldn't mind just being able to pull the thread afterwards, just when you talked about the sequence of construction, sequence of implementation into an underserved community and how that works from the consultation. I don't want to impact people's lunch, so maybe I'll pull the thread afterwards.
Oh, sure.
No problem.
Good.
Yeah.
You'll address that.
So much.
Okay, that will be answered. The thread will be pulled after. It's lunchtime, everyone. Thank you for bearing with. Can we get a round of applause, please, for a ad hoc presentation? Thank you. I don't know what time it is, but we're coming back at 1 p.m., but let's get some grub.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
I was surprised.
Yeah, I was surprised too.
Thanks.
Oh, and please don't forget, we have evaluation QR codes on your tables. Please, we want your feedback. We need your feedback, so don't forget to participate in that. Thank you.